Hello, everyone. Ty Walden here with Ryan Edwards from KOA News Radio. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, definitely. So last Sunday was a bit of it started off a little rough. Thought there was going to be a comeback, but we couldn't do anything to make sure that Falcons' bad curse of blowing big leads happened. So I guess my question for you is what happened with the Broncos in that game against the Falcons?
Well, I think a lot of people noticed, which was pretty obvious, is they got off to another slow start. And you saw that against the Chargers. And then, of course, it showed up again against the Falcons. First of all, it starts with the run. You had Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay combining for 10 rushing yards in the first half on 6 carries. So you're less than 2 yards per carry for your 2 leading rushers. You had a 15-yard reverse there that was a nice play from KJ Hamler, but overall you just weren't running the ball very effectively. I actually thought, going back and watching, I thought Drew Lock overall made some pretty good decisions. Of course, the interception being the one glaring one. I think overall, though, that there's definitely some things to build on. There's some miscommunication stuff happening with the interior of the offensive line and Drew Lock. And it's not so much about pre-snap. Some of it is as far as, diagnosing where the blitz is coming from, where the pressure is going to be coming from for the interior of the offensive line. But it's also post-snap. Once Drew Lock has the ball in his hands, what is he doing to trust his offensive line? What is his offensive line doing to earn that trust in order so that he's not getting, basically beat up back there? So they're working out some things, but it's kind of the combination, a little bit of a perfect storm. You got a rookie center in there who's overall, I think, doing a good job, but there's just some moments in there, 4 or 5 plays a game that there's just not quite on the same page. And then Drew Lock, of course, is just sort of accustomed to having an offensive line let him down. He had that same experience in Missouri, and it seems like he's just a little timid back there at times. Not all the time, but at times. And so, yeah, you got off to a slow start. The defense gave up 4 scoring drives right away, and the Broncos just really were too deep a hole to come back.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing, especially if we're going to help Drew Lock, especially since he's not quite played his 16 games that allow us that measure basically where he is at this state. My biggest thing is how quick we are to abandon the running game. Can you give me a little thought process on why Melvin Gordon, Philip Lindsay aren't exactly running the ball as much as we're used to seeing, or they're not getting those yards we're used to seeing?
Yeah, well, I think some of it is a game script. I mentioned, the defense giving up 4 scoring drives to start off the game. You're in a 20-3 hole at halftime, so you're going to be throwing it more. I'd say also part of it is, Pat Shurmur comes from that Andy Reid coaching tree. There's an emphasis on throwing the ball. So this isn't going to be a run to set up the pass kind of team. It's a pass to set up the run. And so there's just a sort of, and that's why you see 3 wide, 11 personnel so much, because that's just what Pat Shurmur likes to run. Now there's a certain amount of what fits this team better, and that becomes kind of the bigger debate we've seen on social media, where maybe Drew Lock needs a little bit more time in the pocket, and if that's the case, maybe you go a little more 12, get 2 tight ends in there, maybe even you put 2 running backs on the field at a couple of times, and you just kind of think that there might be some opportunities with this personnel to fit a little bit better. But as far as for the running game, I think they've acknowledged that they want to do better at that. The games that they have run the ball better, even in the ones that they've gotten off to a little bit of a slow start, Drew Lock's numbers are better in those games too. So I feel like they're still trying to figure out a little bit of what they are and who they are as it relates to an identity. I'd expect to see a little bit better concentration on the ground at some point. You also got to remember, they really haven't had a fully healthy Melvin Gordon and a fully healthy Philip Lindsay all at the same time. Not very much this year. So I don't think they've really got a chance to show what they're capable of.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point now I'm thinking about it, with both of them being as injured as they are, and just with as many pieces that have come in and come out, it's just really tricky to get chemistry going for that offense.
Well, it is. And and you think about with Drew Lock, for example, he spent the offseason knowing he was the guy. He spent training camp knowing he was the guy. And then he gets into his second game of this season and he gets hurt. And you talk about, derailing the momentum of what you were trying to build. Now, I mean, Jeff Driscoll came in and, he played admirably against the Steelers. It wasn't going to be enough. And then, of course, he ended up getting benched in the next game against the Bucs. They go to Brett Rippon. They get their first win of the season. But all in the mix of that is the guy that you're supposed to be learning is going to be your franchise quarterback or not being on the field. So he doesn't get back onto the field until a couple of games later. And then now you're kind of, I would say starting over, because that's not really appropriate, but you're definitely not starting back from where the momentum was. You're kind of having to pick up and catch up on a few things. Keep in mind this too, with Drew Lock, I mean, he has averaged 27 points per game in the games that he has played, in the 10 games, say the 10 games that he really started and finished, he was having 27 points per game. And, last year we came out of the season averaging a little over 17 points per game as a team. You just sort of think, okay, well, there is something there. Chemistry is still kind of coming along, but I feel like they are building on some things here. But I think that a lot of people get a little impatient and they wonder, what are we actually building to? Are we building to what might end up being, fairly average to middling offense? I mean, you certainly hope not, because most of the NFL needs you to be a little bit more explosive. But right now, I feel like we're in the position of still gathering information, still learning facts. We know a little bit more than we did in the last game, but I don't think we know as much as we're going to know after the Raiders.
Definitely. Hopefully we can get this offense sorted out soon. But I want to touch back a little bit more on those slow starts. That it has been noticed a little bit. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, what do you think is the reason behind the slow start? Is it because, I know the past couple games we've had some practices that were either canceled or they were shortened due to players testing positive for the COVID-19 virus. There's just so much that's going on. Do you think just not being able to have those full practices for those 3 days is impacting this team?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear for this team specifically that COVID has affected them, whether it's players like Graham Glasgow not being available or Shelby Harris, or it is practice time. Missing the preseason games. I think we leaned on the fact that every team's going to sort of experience that coming into the season, so there's not really any excuses. But at the same time, I think there's a little more nuance to that conversation. Just because that's a fact doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. We can say that every team had to deal with the same thing, but every team isn't the individual players and the coaches and this organization. They all kind of are going to interact with it different. Just because Justin Herbert's off to a really hot start doesn't necessarily mean that the Broncos should be off to a really hot start. You know what I'm saying? I think that's kind of a logical fallacy. So I feel like, yeah, COVID has affected things this year coming into the season. The Broncos have multiple times, even Pat Shurmur mentioned it this week, that, they kind of ended up having to use those first 4 games of the season as preseason. And I mean, you hate to do that because they all count, but they needed that time. And so you think about those first 4 games that were considered preseason, you had 3 different quarterbacks in there during that time. So again, try to build momentum off of that. Now in the preseason, it doesn't really matter if you have 3 or 4 different quarterbacks. Who cares? Because the games don't matter, but it does here. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that this team right now is starting to kind of get their feet under them. You're seeing the ability, especially in the second half, to be able to move the ball and to do some things a little more explosive on offense. I'd also factor in, the thing that happened in that Falcons game. You're missing your top 2 cornerbacks. You're missing your entire defensive line. So people say that it sounds excuses. Again, I come back to it. It's just a little more nuance and context to what actually happened.
Right. I definitely noticed during that game injuries, like especially with I think we had Shelby Harris who ended up missing that game, and then surprisingly Bryce Callahan was ruled out for the game, and having not, especially at the time, not having Devontae Bosby, who kind of knows a little bit of the system, it kind of makes it difficult having to rely on Devontae Harris, who hasn't really had a whole lot of starting time, and then you're relying on a rookie, an Ojemudia. It can be really tricky, especially going up against Julio Jones and what should have been a Calvin Ridley if he hadn't gotten hurt.
Yeah, and I mean, they obviously had no problem replicating a lot of the production they get out of Calvin Ridley, who was off to a spectacular start this season. And Julio Jones is just going to be, he's one of the all-timers. He's a Hall of Famer. And that was a heck of a movie put on Michael Ojemudia. And I'd like to believe, because I've been a big Michael Ojemudia guy, even in the pre-draft, that he's going to learn from that and he'll be better for it. But yeah, I mean, it was a little bit, I wouldn't say a perfect storm, but again, it was kind of one of those things like, okay, yeah, Devontae Bosby would have probably filled in a little bit better than Devontae Harris, who's been a very good special teams player, but has been inconsistent at cornerback. And in this league, you can't really be inconsistent at that position because you basically are just going to get burned constantly. So yeah, I mean, it was all those things factoring in, missing those guys. This week you're going to have Bouye back. You're going to hopefully, as we expect, Bryce Callahan back. Bosby is here if you need him. I don't think he's going to be available for this game, but he is going to be back as far as a guy that could contribute. Michael Ojemudia, who's not a number one, and he was kind of forced to be a little bit of a number one at times. He is a zone corner, and he's really, really good at it. He shows a lot of natural instincts to the position. But again, if you're asking him to be a man up corner as number one, that's just not really what his game plan is. He's a great fit for this defense and this scheme, and he will thrive. And we've seen moments of it. But I think that they were all in the secondary tasked with doing something that they're just not really accustomed to doing.
Really like that response, actually, now that we got to see a little bit more of how the defense works. Like, we need all these pieces to work together in order to be successful. So with that being said, we're halfway through the season, 8 games in, we're 3-5. I want to get your honest assessment on how you think the rest of the season goes the rest of the way. I know there's been talks that there's a chance we could finish 500. There's a chance there might be a chance we could sneak in, especially if there's canceled games, them adding other teams. There's even been talks that we just slightly miss it. So I just want to know what you believe will happen for these final 8 games.
Well, I mean, it's a tough schedule if you're playing inconsistent football. I mean, honestly, in this league, you just can't do that in really any of the phases. And it's been each game that they've had somebody some facet of their game let them down. Whether it's the defense, giving up all those scoring drives to the Falcons that basically put the offense in too big of a hole. Special teams has let this team down. The offense, of course, as we mentioned, slow starts has let them down. So for me, what I want to see more than a specific outcome is just, for the team to start playing some complete games or relatively close to complete games. I mean, we were having a kind of a conversation the other night on the air about, what we want to see from the offense and as it relates specifically to the rest of the AFC West. And, this kind of came up on Twitter about, will Drew Lock ever be better than the quarterbacks in this division? And so we kind of were like, well, wait a minute. I don't necessarily need him to be better than, well, first of all, I don't need him to be Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is a bit of a unicorn. What I need him to be is consistently competitive. I need the offense to know that, hey, every single time we go into any one of these matchups, we're going to be able to go toe to toe with them. And I mean, how many years has it been since you felt like that, against the Chiefs, for instance? Like, how many years has it been since you've been like, yeah, the Broncos are going to beat this team today, or at least I know that they're going to be in it in the fourth quarter. And against the Raiders, there's a little bit of hope because the Raiders are also, at times inconsistent, not this year, but most of the time. And then, the Chargers are the Chargers, and they obviously look like they found their guy. But yeah, the thing that I'm looking at more than anything over the next 8 games is just to see all 3 phases kind of work together, play complementary football, not put each other in bad situations, and find a way to build on that into the future. Because I mean, I still think there's a really bright future. I really like a lot of the way they've constructed this roster. But the outcome of wins and losses, those will come when you start figuring out some of the more finer details.
Right. Definitely with playing all 3 phases of the game, maybe not as perfectly, but at least having them sync up a little bit, I think will go a long way in getting this team back to where they were back when Peyton Manning was leading the team, maybe even a little bit more before then.
Right. And that's exactly what you're looking for. I mean, again, we don't need Drew Lock even to be Peyton Manning. You just need him to be the best version that he can be for this team. I think he's got the raw tools to eventually be a very good quarterback in this league. But, there are just certain things that are not quite clicking just yet. And once again, like it might sound like an excuse, but You're talking about a guy that, came into the league with one OC and one quarterbacks coach and got that completely changed on him the very next year. And in the midst of that, didn't really get OTAs. And in the midst of that, didn't have preseason games, and then got hurt 2 games into the season. So, I mean, again, it's not excuses. It's just part of, I guess, the story, the narrative of what's going on with this team. And so, they have to figure it out. We can debate, one way or the other where this should go and where we expect it to go. But, right now I feel like, the cooler heads in that organization, that building, are just trying to find a way to build on each moment from what they did well in the previous game to the next one. And this game coming up against the Raiders is another perfect example. It's another kind of exploitable matchup on the defensive side. The Broncos offense should be able to move the ball. It's just kind of a matter of, okay, are they going to be able to put it together? And simultaneously, the Raiders offense is playing pretty well. A lot of really talented weapons out there. Can the Broncos defense give their offense a chance to stay in the game? If it's a 21-3 lead for the Raiders at halftime, I mean, isn't that not just the situation they found themselves in over and over again? There's just no way they're coming back from that.
Right. I actually do want to feed up a little bit on that Raiders game. You did touch up a little bit on possibly what Denver can do to secure the win against the Raiders. Is there anything else you would be looking into that could help sway the Broncos into getting a win in Las Vegas?
Well, I mean, the thing that I've kind of hammered home over the course of this week is just that they need to start. It doesn't have to be so simple as they have to be better at this one thing, but I'm going to boil it down. I mean, third downs right now are one of the biggest things. Third downs, red zone. If they can, they've shown improvement in red zone, but third downs, they're still one of the worst in the league as it relates to putting themselves in manageable position. Their down and distance is the worst in the league. 8.3 yards down in distance on third downs. And like I said, that is the worst in the league. They only convert 37% of the time at that down and distance. But you saw when they're third and manageable, third and short, they convert that with ease. They have no problem with that. It's just that third 8 and beyond. And in the first half against the Falcons specifically, you had a 3rd and 15 twice, you had a 3rd and 10, and you had a 3rd and 9. You didn't convert a single one of those, but you did have a 3rd and short, and you converted that one. So it just kind of goes to show you, for this team. And I also went and looked back at, their performances this year. And on third down, their 3 best scoring games of the season were all their best third down conversion rates too. I mean, it makes sense, right? They kind of go hand in hand, but I'm just saying, like, okay, well, you're going to have to score some points to beat the Raiders. Like, this is more than likely not going to be the first of 20 wins. So if we understand that that's the principle here, just put together another solid, hey, whether it's running on first down or second down, because I know that Pat Shurmur really loves to run on second down, whatever it ends up being, you have to get to 3rd and 5 or less, like that. Like, let's work towards that. And then, you're going to get first downs. You collect first downs, you collect enough of those, you're going to get in the end zone too. And I feel like that's something that has to happen this game.
Definitely. I'm going to touch up a little bit on that. Those third down conversions, I definitely see where that will be key, because I've noticed that first down and second down usually will end up, if those don't go well, it becomes a longer position. And what I'm seeing is when we're running plays on first and second down, I'm seeing a lot of plays that go for negative or 0 yards. And I feel like that could, especially for Broncos country fans, it can be a little demoralizing that we're only getting 1, 2, 0 yards on first down, which makes it very difficult to keep moving the ball forward and getting those points.
Well, right. And again, when you're talking about an offense, as you mentioned, that's struggling for chemistry, that's struggling to kind of do the finer details. And I mean, and again, teams are starting to figure out that, what we got to do is we got to put a lot of pressure up the middle on this team. Drew Lock struggles, the offensive line struggles. They're not attacking this team at the edges. So many years it's, Garrett Bowles with holding calls or getting beat off the edge, or whoever was at right tackle, the turnstile there. It hasn't been like that this year. Everybody's coming after the Broncos up the middle. And so absolutely, put yourself in manageable situations on third down and then, see where things go. But I mean, you're trying to find chemistry, and the best way to find chemistry is to actually have success.
Totally. So looking at this game as well, as far as what's going to work, is there a certain Denver Broncos player you're looking towards that could be that X factor that will lead the Broncos to victory?
Well, I mean, we mentioned, getting back to running the ball a little bit. I mean, and I'm not going to sit here and just say, you got to force feed, Phil here, but I'd like to see Philip Lindsay involved a little bit more. He's certainly a spark for this team. And I feel like if you can get Philip Lindsay going, in between the 20s, giving you some big plays, Melvin Gordon being a little bit more of your situational back, your third down guy, and short yardage, anything like that. I feel like, kind of the mix of those two can really work out well. And I'm not saying that it has to be 20 rushing attempts in the first half, but there is going to have to be a little bit of a dedication to that to sort of help out your quarterback and help out your offensive line. Drew Lock, what did he throw for 48 times against the Falcons? That's not going to work. You can't do that. We can't make that the plan. And I don't care if you came from the Andy Reid coaching tree. This offense and the personnel isn't built to do something like that. Give Drew Lock opportunities to be successful. If you can get something going with the running game, it'll spark the rest of the team. We saw that in the Chargers game when Philip Lindsay ran in that 55-yarder. I'd like to just see a little bit of a emphasis on the running backs. And, even if you're not getting things working out in specifically in the run game, sometimes you can supplement the run game by short passes, even short passes to your running backs out of the backfield. The Patriots, have made a career off of doing things like that, the short passes out of the backfield. So we haven't really seen much of a screen game. We haven't really seen a lot of checkdowns to running backs, except for maybe that last drive against the Chargers. Those are things that can work. And they're things that are sometimes your quarterback's best friend.
Agreed. Now we touched a little bit on the offensive side of the ball. As far as defense is concerned, because I know I was talking to someone actually not that long ago, the Raiders are doing pretty well on offense. Carr is doing pretty well as far as I know. So especially with them having Aguilar, and then you've got Josh Jacobs in the backfield. Where specifically do you believe the Broncos need to target in order to slow down this Raiders offense?
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. Derek Carr, he has these games against the Broncos where he just gets the ball out at super fast, 80+% completion. And you're just like, man, that is tough to stop, to hit a guy, to get to a guy when he's getting the ball out in 2 seconds or just shortly over 2 seconds. This one's going to be where, I think it's pretty consistent for the Broncos. Don't let him get going on the running game. Don't let Josh Jacobs and Devontae Booker, believe it or not, is having a pretty good year. Yep. Don't let those guys get going. And then, of course, you can't give up the big plays. You can't let Henry Ruggs get behind you. You can't let Darren Waller, go nuts in this game. They have a lot of speed. As you mentioned, Nelson Aguilar leads the league right now in yards per catch. That you have to sort of manage and mitigate here a little bit, knowing that, what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to run it on you and find success and let that set up some bigger plays downfield. And, you're going to be without Shelby Harris again, without your starting D line. They did a pretty good job against the run against the Falcons, but it didn't really matter because the Falcons did whatever they wanted through the passing game. Mm-hmm. So now you're going to face a team that is going to be looking to be pretty balanced against you, and you're going to have to not let them.
Hopefully we don't let them and we can secure that win. So Ryan, I do want to thank you for joining me for this. Pleasure talking Broncos football with you.
Yeah, anytime.
Awesome. I'll catch you later.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
Take care.
You too.